Okay, just end of year wrapping things up. Obviously, like I said yesterday, more abruptly and not in the fashion in which I had anticipated, but just doing a little bit of reflecting this morning. It was hard to imagine that after the Arizona game, we get to 9-6. Feels like we're one of the 2 or 3 teams to beat, team that everybody's talking about. And when you started thinking about how this was all going to end, certainly no one, including myself, really ever thought it would end like it did the last 2 weeks. That's something that can't be undone. It's part of our record. It's part of my record. Not a shining moment, but it's the analogy and thought that came to my mind this morning was it's a scar. You get injured, you go through an experience in life that you weren't anticipating, and it hurt. You had, there's some kind of, and you end up with a scar from that experience. And that's essentially the way I'm looking at what's happened this year in the last 2 weeks, and this particular last 2 weeks. There's no way to undo it. So what are we going to do? How are we going to respond? How am I going to respond? Well, we're going to learn from it, get better. One thing in this building is everybody is very familiar with scars. Probably most of the guys have scars from injuries and surgeries. And we all know that every now and then we look down at that scar and we realize that, what we have to overcome. When we see those scars, we remember exactly how we had that injury, exactly what it felt like. But then they also serve to motivate us to overcome. And that's what we're going to do. That's what I'll do. That's what we will do. And then when you do overcome, when you have achieved the goal that you wanted to achieve, you can look back on that. And that's a significant part of the story. That in some ways that can be the story of a new beginning, that you hit rock bottom. Sometimes when you hit rock bottom, that's when a new beginning starts. And in this business, it's one of the beauties of it. The 2022 season starts today, and we're getting at it, working hard, excited about the coming year. Feel like we have many coaches and players to form the nucleus of a team that is very close. When you think about those top tier teams, we possess a team that we were in that discussion for much of the year. And so for us to take that final step to get up in there at the very top where we want to be, I think everybody understands that's not a far stretch. We got the guys to do it. We'll get better this year. This is the NFL. There's changes in personnel. So that stuff happens, and it's all for the betterment of the club. And that'll be the process that we'll undergo.
All right, Zach Kiefer.
Hey, Frank. Have you talked to Jim Irsay in the last couple of days? And I'm just curious, without sharing the details, the tenor of that conversation as you look to the future. And then secondly, I know it's the day after the season, but as you sit there right now, do you expect Carson Wentz to be your quarterback in 2022?
Yeah, the first question, I did speak with Mr. Irsay last night. Actually, when we got back, Chris, he wanted to meet with Chris and I. So we came back over here to the building last night and met with Mr. Irsay for a couple hours, just reflecting on the game, on the season. He's got a very unique perspective, and, I love how his approach and how demanding and holding us all accountable, also showing support as an owner that he wants to do whatever it takes, to get our organization to the top, to get our team to the top. So, it was a good conversation, a supportive conversation, but also demanding and wanting answers, and and wanting to hold us accountable. So that's that question. As far as Carson, again, I mentioned this the other day, just with individuals. We love the team we had this year. We knew everyone we brought in this year. We expected to play winning football. Next year's roster will be next year's roster. I'm not going to evaluate or talk about any. I don't want to just open it up with one player and then start talking about all of them. So,
Bob Kravitz.
Frank, as you kind of go through the autopsy of this season, I know you're just getting into it now, but looking back, were there any signs, anything at all that happened in the last 2-3 weeks that gave you pause, made you wonder whether this team is ready to take that next step?
Yeah, and it's a great word, Bob. And in fact, that word's been used here by coaching staff a couple times today, that's what we'll be doing, having, evaluating what caused this season to come to the dead end that it did. So today has been, honestly, I've been talking with players all morning and been talking with players and coaches all morning. So that process will really start after this meeting here and then in the next couple of weeks. I did not see anything in the last few weeks that gave me reason to think that we were going to have this abrupt of an ending. I've seen plenty of things that make me think we can take the next step. Core leadership, improvements throughout the season in situational football, defensively and offensively, very good special teams plays, 3 pretty significant road wins against playoff teams. Those are all good signs that we can win those kind of games, but also showing some weakness that we have to figure out and learn to overcome.
Thanks.
Charlie Clifford.
Frank, statistically with the defense, the 3-and-out numbers, the takeaways, it felt like that unit took a step forward this year. What's your assessment overall of that group?
Yeah, I think those are big deals. The 3-and-out thing is a big deal, and the takeaways are obviously, as we know, a huge deal. So, and then, even in the areas where we might have been ranked middle of the pack, and I don't know all the stats right off my head right now, but I'm pretty sure in both third down and red zone, as the year went on, we got better. So I think that's important to note. So I do think the defense was on the right track as the year went on in getting better. Really feel excited about the takeaway deal and feel good about schematically and systematically how we were approaching third down and red zone. Just feel like we got better as a team in that regard.
George Bremer.
I think it was really an odd season, 1-4 start, and then you have the 8-2 run, and then the 0-2 finish. How do you kind of find more consistency in that, get that 8-2 run to be more more of what you see and not the other two periods? Yeah,
that's George, that's going to be that's part of what Bob was talking about, the autopsy report. I know this, a big part of the answer has to be in how we start these seasons. It's hard. You got to use so much gas to get back in it. You can't help but wonder, does that take its toll? I remember we said that before one time, and I don't know the answer to that right now sitting here. But you're running at high RPMs for so long to get back in the game. I didn't feel that the last couple of weeks, but the way we played reflected that a little bit. And so that was disappointing.
Joel Erickson.
Frank, when a quarterback's been in the NFL as long as Carson has, can their style change dramatically in terms of, maybe getting to the check down more, that kind of thing? Or is the quarterback style kind of their style that this deep into their career?
No, I do think we always talk, I like to talk about incremental improvements. So Joel, I do think that's a fair question. And, of course, we all know, can we make improvements? Yes, that's the obvious answer. What does that look like, and what's that process look like? And I think you got to say they got to be incremental improvements. I mean, it's hard to skip steps. And so I think in some ways Carson made some good progress this year. I think there's other things he's working on that we're working on as an offense. Obviously, we know the quarterback gets too much credit and too much blame. We know it's a hard position to play. We know the quarterback position is very dependent on everybody else. So not escaping any of that, just dealing with the reality of we always got to be making incremental improvements, right, at every position as coaches and as players. And I think, Joel, that can ultimately lead to, oh, you get 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, he really had that. That's been we saw the beginnings of that there, but that's been a significant change. You know, that we're doing this, a player, whether it's Carson, or I'm not just talking about Carson, this is anybody, they really have improved their game that way.
Kevin Bowen.
Hey, Frank, I've got two on Carson. Why do you think his play kind of dipped towards the second half of the season? I mean, seemingly he got healthier than he was at the start of the year. And why did you see anything on why it dipped?
Well, what I would say is without, you know, we've talked about this as a group, right, where we got so run centric there for a number of weeks that I just think it became hard to find the rhythm in the pass game that we wanted, whatever that reason was. I'm not going to point fingers at what I think that was, because I got to sit down and look at it, go back through every game and all the cut ups, and that's what we'll do. But just off the cuff, I think we were adapting as what does life look like of this offense, you know, when you got an MVP candidate as your tailback, as your running back, and is doing what he's doing. And because the plan is never to be a run only power run football team. That's not the plan. The plan is to be dynamic in both the run and the pass. Yes, it can be centered around Jonathan to the degree that is appropriate because he's a unique player, but the plan is always going to be dynamic in both aspects of the game.
And then with your pass rush, your pressure rate was pretty low again this season. You guys have invested a lot there. Why do you think that pressure rate has not climbed over the years?
Well, you know, obviously we took 2 guys in the draft this past year. So, and one of them and Dio was of course hurt, had the Achilles. So he only really played the latter half of the year. So I think we can understand that one. I think Quiddy came in and did a nice job. I think everyone would agree. I think everyone's feeling good about drafting Quiddy Pay right now. I mean, that's what I feel. And so we'll look down and look at the film closely, but I'm happy about him and happy about Dio. I mean, I think that he's got some real potential. So, you know, I'll have to go back and look at and I'll look at it closely, you know, pressure, the lack of pressure. It's interesting to note though, what we were saying before, how we ended up with so many turnovers this year. So Kevin, I want to go back and look at, I know pressure numbers are, but were we forcing quarterbacks into decisions or forcing play? I don't know the answer to that right now. So we were doing something right on defense that was causing a lot of turnovers. Our pressure numbers were down, sack numbers were down, but yet some of the other things are right. So we need to put those pieces to the puzzle together.
Mike Chappell.
Yeah, Frank, with your meeting with Jim last night, you said it was a good conversation and, you know, accountability and supportive. I mean, how did you get a tenor from him on, you know, we just need to get better here and there? How, you know, accountability is a strange thing when you look across the league today. How did you and Chris leave that meeting as far as moving forward, I guess, as awkward as it is?
Yeah, just with the resolve to do whatever it takes. You know, Mr. Irsay, and I know everybody knows this about him. He's been around the game a long time. We always say that, but it's true. And every time I walk out of his office, I realize how true that is. And he's got a very unique football mind, and he always has something insightful to say. Obviously, I know you're not asking me to go into the details of that here now, chap, because you know that wouldn't be appropriate. But I always walk out of there saying, you know, that's a good insight. That's a good insight. I just learned something from that. It's just giving me a different perspective on something. That's without fail. That happens every time we go back there. So, you know, Chris and I walked out of there, you know, with the resolve, like we're gonna get better. We're gonna get better. And we walked out of there saying we got a lot of the right pieces in place. A lot of the right pieces in place. I mean, my goodness, I love our players, respect our players, And if I'm a Colts fan, I'm fired up about, I'm incredibly disappointed about the way this season ended, but I understand that there's some makings here of a very good football team.
Just a quick
Mike, well-
follow-up, and you've talked about it with the passing game. Isn't it fair that, like you said, the last half of the season, it wasn't good enough? At some level, it's got to be able to compensate for other deficiencies, and it just couldn't do that over the last half of the season?
As a general statement, I would say that seems to be a fair statement, that we got to be better in the passing game. I would say that anyway, but I just think it was definitely below our standards, and there's multiple reasons for that. We have to take ownership of that as coaches and players, every one of us, in every area, and that has to improve.
All right, we'll go three more. Mike Wells.
Frank, I got a two-part question. Has it been normal for you to meet with Jim as quick as you did yesterday? Like take last season when you lost to Buffalo, did you meet with him right after the Buffalo game?
I don't know. I don't think we did last year. I don't recall the seasons before that, Mike. I mean, Chris and I normally meet with him pretty quick, whether it was, I don't think it's standard practice to meet right then and there, but I don't recall 100% off the top of my head.
All right.
It's
And then
usually-
second,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm good.
Okay. And then second part of that question is, you've said a number of times, you guys got to get better in the passing game. As the head coach, do you feel like you failed in getting the best out of Carson this year?
I think we're all in process. I think we're all trying to get better as coaches and as players. So, we failed as a team to get where we wanted to get this year. So I'm the head coach. I also have a big role in the offense. So again, the passing game is very complex, as you know, Mike. Quarterback is very central to that, but there's a lot of other factors as well. So we'll take it piece by piece. We'll evaluate his play. I'll evaluate, how we're coaching him, how I'm coaching him with each position in the pass game. Take it apart piece by piece and then put it back together.
Bob Kravitz.
So Frank, given your very personal affinity for Carson, are you at all concerned that you might not be able to objectively appraise him, maybe as harshly as he needs to be appraised?
Well, I think it's fair to say that, first of all, I like that question. Secondly, I would say that's a natural question, but I can honestly say I have an affinity for a lot of our players. And now certainly because of Carson and I's past relationship working together and because the quarterback thing. But I've been here, I was with Carson for 2 years in Philadelphia. I've been here for 4 years with many of these players. So I feel a connection to these players that is very deep. And I do feel a deep connection with Carson. And I do check myself on that kind of stuff, Bob, all the time. With Chris, Chris is great in that regard. You guys know Chris. I mean, he's not going to ever sugarcoat it, right? So, and then secondly, I can honestly say in other ways, I probably have been more critical and coached him harder this year than I did in the first 2 years I was with him in Philadelphia.
All right, last one, Zach Kiefer.
Frank, you're the quarterback guy. I wonder, does it ever feel like you're kind of running on a hamster wheel? 4 years, 4 quarterbacks. It's very obvious that the passing game didn't get it done this season. And that's such a position that requires continuity. What's your level of frustration that 4 years into your head coaching tenure, you guys haven't necessarily figured that out?
Yeah, it is a little frustrating, Zach. And it's funny you say that because I was just talking about that with some guys today. Like I would love to have an OTAs where, which we have not had here in a couple of years, where I don't care. I'll give up the 11-on-11 drills. But let us just have as many reps of 7-on-7 as we can, so we can fine tune the passing game. There's no shortcut for that stuff. That you need to do that as a player and as an offense to get better, to learn the offense, to really understand the nuances of it, the timing, the rhythm, the location of the throw, working through progressions. And we've had none of that. We've virtually had very little of that. So would love to get to the point, hope something works out where we can have a normal off season, and that we're able to find a way to get players in the building to work, in our schemes and to get better. And as you said, Zach, in the pass game, particularly to spend a lot of time in those areas.